Hello everybody, today I wanted to talk a bit about how Sonic's direction is going up and up in terms of its favourability to the public. After a decade or so of misery, the blue blur has been shining under the morning sun in this new direction for the series. But is it so new? It's more that the series is returning to some of its roots and then using them to their advantage, rather than the recent past where it was shunning its own heritage at the expense of the reason so many of us got involved into the franchise in the first place. What I'm really talking about is a return to focusing on the characters and the stories they can tell, alongside, of course, good gameplay. And this all really started with the Paramount Sonic the Hedgehog movies. Now, these movies are all well and good on their own merit. A lot of people are only fans of the movies or learned about Sonic through the movies, and I'm not the biggest fan of all of them anyway, but that's not the point. The point about these films is that they showed off the characters, starting with Sonic, but then the other two definitely highlighted the dynamics of Sonic and his other animal friends. And this sort of slapped Sega across the face to finally start listening to the calls that so many fans have been sending them for years at that point, that the change in direction around the time of Sonic Colors, where they were reducing both story and character depth as a defense shield from the humiliation that was the failure of Sonic 06, actually people that cared about the series didn't want to see that. Yes, we wanted good gameplay, not buggy messes, but you can still do that with interesting characters and stories. But the 2010s of Sonic was really about pushing that away and just focusing on gameplay with the bare minimum surrounding context. Problem is, the gameplay also sucked for a lot of those titles. Nonetheless, these movies brought the Sonic characters back in the focus, as well as just confidence in the brand. They showed that if you did something even somewhat competent and not a buggy mess, people would go out and spend money on it. Sonic Forces was the most recent mainline game around this time, and the difference between how that game was received and how Sonic Movie 1 was received, night and day. So even Sega couldn't ignore these obvious signs that they needed to finally pivot course and go back to what made them great. From the narrative standpoint, the biggest area they had to address was the reception of their supporting cast. The damage done to the image of these characters was severe. Someone, for example, like Shadow the Hedgehog, which I've made numerous videos breaking down, had completely been ruined and distorted to the point where if you were someone who joined the series in the 2010 time period, your point of view of who Shadow is could very well be completely detached from when he was actually first created and the time following that. I've seen numerous comments on other videos of people expressing such things where they don't understand why people are saying that the Shadow that was there was bad, because it was completely different. But we've already talked about this, so I won't linger on it for too long. The point is, characters such as Shadow had so much damage or changes for the sake of it done to them that had to be repaired. Sega went around this with Sonic Frontiers mainly by only focusing on a small amount of the cast and building them back up. This is really easy to see in a character like Tails, where he just flat out says his character writing has been inconsistent, and then they're bringing up moments in their past and trying to establish what matters, and that's why Sonic Frontiers has a lot of references. People like to lambast Ian Flynn for referencing the past in Frontiers, and somehow they are missing the point that that game was about re-establishing things so that we know they both exist and that they do actually matter, and we can move past some of the bad changes, and that allows us a stable foundation for the series to now build and grow from, rather than having to reconcile all the chaos that came before it. Frontiers is about knocking it down, picking good building blocks, and starting again. That's what that game did. They did it with Knuckles as well. They re-established his links to Angel Island, the Master Emerald, but they also set up reasons that perhaps he might go on more adventures despite the duty he has, which is never a discussion we've seen before. Yes, Amy has a very different character, but she's also one of the members of the Sonic cast that had changed a lot in the disruptive 2010s, because she had a criticism basically at all points of her existence. All of her major character types have been criticized, so they just tried a new one really with Frontiers, leaning heavily on empathy and sharing love, or whatever that means. So it's not what we've had in the past at all. It's new, and either you like it or you don't. But the point is, that was still an attempt of rebuilding the character and moving forward. The fact that Frontiers is pretty story focused as well is just a clear example of what we're talking about. Colors' story, super light. Force's story was in depth, in theory, but the execution was so lazy and half-handed, and it just clearly didn't take itself seriously. I've got a whole video on Sonic Forces though, if you want more in-depth thoughts about that. So they did a good job in Frontiers. Lots of people enjoyed the characters, lots of people enjoyed the style of the story, how it was more action-paced, or cool for a lack of a better term, and that it was important. And they even created a new story-relevant character with Sage, who we haven't seen too much of since then yet, but clearly the fan base has taken a huge liking to her, and yet she does have narrative potential, so we'll have to see where that goes. But that isn't the only place this rebuilding happened, and to be fair, divisions of Sega have been working on this a little bit longer than Sonic Team, and by that I really mean IDW. The IDW comics were cursed, in my opinion. They had to grow an interesting story from the skeleton of Sonic Forces, of all things. Such a handicap to the beginning of a show, but I think they did a good job. They used the characters to the extent they were allowed, and when the comic began, this is pretty important to note, when the comic began, the way that the Sonic characters had to be written was reflective of the series' current state. They had a bit more leeway, at least that's how it seems to be from me reading them, and also the people working on the comics really understood the characters, so they got more mileage out of it, but they were limited still by the same conditions, and you can really see that in certain characters in certain arcs. But overall, they did a good job at making the characters feel the way they used to before the great simplification affected the franchise. And whilst the stories they were telling at first perhaps weren't too big, very soon into the comic run, they would get more meaningful interactions, both with themselves and with a grand narrative. But fast forward to today, where this franchise is taking its story and characters more seriously, and IDW is really thriving, both with original characters, concepts, and established game lore. We've got to see so many great interactions between the different members of the cast. And on top of that, I feel that the character-driven storytelling has really begun to peak. Issue 80 of Sonic IDW has a perfect depiction of Team Chaotix, Sonic, Shadow, and Rouge, both in terms of them individually and how they all bounce off each other. It's absolutely perfect. Rouge is smart, mysterious, and skilled. Most of the team members don't really know what she wants, and it's uncertain how far she'll go in terms of betraying people for her own gain, but ultimately, she still helps everyone get the mission done. Shadow is there. He's helping everyone. He's here on a mission. He has a purpose. He's not needlessly putting down the others, though. He's not insulting them. He's not calling them names. He's not trying to kill them for some reason. He is there. He is helping. He will team up with them. But he's here for a purpose. And he can have fun with it, too. It's so well done. If you compare the Shadow we see in issue 80 to the Shadow we see telling us that cowards run and he wins, once again, night and day, and my god, I'm glad that was changed. The Chaotix themselves, perfect. They interact so well. The team dynamics are amazing. You really love to see it, especially with Sonic. The way they bounce off with Sonic is great, and the fact that Sonic has some camaraderie with all of the different members involved shows why he's the main character. and he flows with anyone else. It was just great. And the art, by the way, I know it's not really relevant, but the art was so on point in issue 80. I don't know what they did there, but it was a really well done job. Regardless, the point is that IDW today shows us that the character writing is understood, and it's important because some of the writers of the comics are also writers on the games, and you can see where it begins to connect. I've harped on about story and narrative so far, so let's pivot to gameplay for a bit, since that's ultimately what the Sonic series is known for. In Sonic Frontier's Final Horizon update, we were finally given meaningful sections of playable characters that aren't Sonic or a clone of Sonic with different movesets in the form of Tails, Knuckles and Amy Rose, and that was a really surprising but welcome change of pace. Previously, the only one we got was Shadow, and the problem is every time they brought Shadow back, it was purely as a Sonic reskin. He had no actual meaningful differences, and that was really sad, and it was the bare minimum of saying you've made someone else playable. But in Frontiers, they actually did it. They actually gave them new stuff, unique stuff, and that was great. So many people enjoyed it. Now, not all of them were as successful as each other. I feel like Amy was just flat out the best one to play as out of the new ones, Knuckles probably being the worst. But the point is, it was finally happening. After so long of being in the shadow of Sonic 06, which came out in 2006, by the way, we were finally moving past it and going back to something that even the classic games understood people wanted to do, which is playing as other characters. Of course, this was only in an update, so the scope of their playability was quite restricted, but it was a good sign, and it's important that going forward they would build off of that. And in a way, they did. An Apple exclusive game called Sonic Dream Team would come out, and that would also feature multiple playable characters with slight differences that they allowed you to place wherever you wanted. And that would be great. I say would because I don't have Apple, I've never played it once, but it looks like it's fun. And they would add Shadow later on as well to bring even more playable characters to that game. And that shows that Sega is still very much interested in this idea, and it wasn't just a marketing technique for Frontiers. So the next mainline game should, by default, when it comes out, have someone else that is not a Sonic clone playable. It just should. If it doesn't, then they're either trying to milk you for paid DLC, or they don't actually care. There is zero reason the next game shouldn't let you play as someone that isn't Sonic at launch. Seeing as Dream Team is a mobile game, depending on how much stock you put in that sort of thing, you could also look at the Sonic Forces Speed Battle mobile game that celebrates a lot of characters, giving them new 3D renders and models to be playable in the multiplayer racing. It's not canon, and again, it's just a mobile spin-off game, but you get characters such as Mephiles the Dark, or the Black Knight characters resurrected into this thing, or even the Babylon Rogues on their extreme gear. Now this is pretty topical at the moment, because the Babylon Rogues were not really seen ever since Sonic Free Riders, which destroyed their series. IDW would bring them back quite early on, in fact, and I think that was smart because they're great characters, it's fun to have them around. But gameplay wise, the mobile game was the first time we would see them. But then a new game called Sonic Crossworlds would come out, and it feature the Babylon Rogues front and center, since it's a racer, giving them their extreme gear gameplay and making them have character interactions with all of the pre-existing Sonic cast. And in the marketing, they would also play off the characters and speaking about their past or their personalities, which would introduce new people to who these people are and what they're about. And it was a fantastic move. Even the ones with Sonic and Tails, not just the ones with Jet and Wave. Amazing marketing that leaned into the strengths of the series and showed that Sega are definitely still invested in building all of this up. The fact that they also have actual lore managers now in the Sonic development team to make sure the brand stays somewhat consistent, and that they've done all these Tails tubes to try and consolidate the lore, clear up some confusing elements, and, you know, put it into one block so that we can build forward like they did with Frontiers for the games. All of this shows, hopefully, Sega is committed to stories and characters. But the gameplay being bangers as well is what's important. Sonic Racing Crossworlds is currently, in my opinion, outperforming Mario Kart in terms of player enjoyment. It's a fantastic game. I've been enjoying it like crazy, and I will probably want to make some videos on it in the future. But also, they had Shadow Generations that came out after Sonic Frontiers, and this game was about putting more story focus back on Shadow, fixing his character a bit more definitively, the way Frontiers was trying to do for the other characters. And then gameplay wise, they went back to Sonic Generations and then added some of the things people liked from Sonic Frontiers into that formula to build a hybrid of the two gameplays that a lot of people were fans of. And they even tried experimental things with Doom powers and Chaos Control, which is way better than Shadow just being a Sonic reskin. Everywhere you look in the modern day, you see Sonic actually daring to use its strengths, whether it be its fast, high-speed platforming gameplay, using iconic features like Chaos Control that's got lots of Sonic identity built into it, or whether it's the stories being important, or even if it's just the fact that the series isn't a laughingstock anymore. Sonic is doing great. Sonic is doing numbers, Sonic is on the up, and I can't wait to see where they go next. Just hope that Sega remembers that the characters and stories are part of the parcel that makes Sonic stand out. With a game like Mario, sure, you might like the character, but no one is going to feel as strongly as they do about Toadstool getting in a car accident than they would with Cream. You know, like, people care more about the Sonic characters usually because they've got more going on, or they did, and we're slowly getting that back. Character focus is important, so is good gameplay. We're getting both. Can't wait to see more. That's all I had to say on the topic for now though. What do you think about how the series is taking, how important characters and stories are? Have I been over exaggerating that, or do you agree with me? Sonic Racing Crossworlds right now has so much good character built into it, and it's good gameplay, so it's the best of both worlds, and it's a really good holdover, I think, until the next main game. Hopefully they support it for quite some time, but if you have anything else to add to the conversation, feel free to do so in the comments down below. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope you have a great day, and to see you next time. This is the Mighty Emperor, signing off.